actually gets to decide what's in fashion? And who decided that things like skinny jeans were no longer trendy? Do I have to wait another 20 years to get mine out of the cupboard? And what does that mean for the way we train voices in the ever-changing world of musical trends? Particularly when it comes to that functional registration training. If male falsetto is becoming more popular, how do we train that in balance in our singing lessons? And if female voices are expected to belt higher and higher, what does that actually mean for the way these two registers interlink and how we actually build that passaggio and acoustic registers? Well, after finding April Young's article in Journal of Singing on the very topic of changing musical trends, we've invited her along to chat about it. April, over to you.
April, I grew up in the 90s, and some trends that I remember from around that time are skirt trousers. You wore a pair of pants and you wore a skirt over it, which I'm really glad that hasn't made a comeback because that's probably for the best. Tamagotchis. Did you ever have Tamagotchis? This like little weird pixelated animal thing on a tiny little computerized device. They were all over the place when I was younger. And the game Snake on the old Nokia 3210, which was again like this pixelated worm that you had to get around this tiny screen and eat the little bit of pixelated food. And if you bashed into part of your tail, you'd lose. And it was so addictive. And I'm glad now that that doesn't exist on my phone because I'd be not getting anything done. But if you could bring back anything, a trend from when you were growing up, what would that be?
Well, I'm an 80s girl, so I went to high school in the 80s, so I'm giving away my age. But it takes a lot of work to make my hair look small. So big hair was the 80s, right? So I'd bring back big hair.
Oh, yeah. I have like one strand of hair though. My hair's really thin, so I don't think I'd fit in. But speaking of trends, back in 2019, you wrote a really great article for Journal of Singing called Mixed Up and Upside Down, Underdeveloped Registers in Men and Women Due to Vocal Trends in Popular Music, turning two pedagogic challenges into opportunities in today's voice studio. In the beginning, you explain how in 1967, William Venard had called falsetto the unused register for men and chest voice as the unused register for women. Now, skipping forward to 2019, at the time of your article, that wasn't really the case any longer. How would you describe trends in CCM, contemporary commercial music now, in 2025, 6 years on from that article?
Well, first, I apologize for that you had to read that long, wordy title.
Did it count towards your word count? Because that's great. So I like your style.
And I have to say thank you to my students because our students are who keep us up on the trends, right? They're the ones I would not know what they are if they weren't bringing me the music that they want to sing. I would say, you know, there's still, of course, a lot of belting in women singing, but there's a new trend in head voice where women are singing in a breathy kind of whisper voice. That's a trend that we're seeing in pop. I would say the trend has continued even further down the road for male falsetto in CCM. We're seeing more male falsetto, agile male falsetto, and I would categorize music theater under CCM as well. So we're seeing more tenors, more tenor rolls, higher singing, higher belting, that sort of thing.
And just to caveat how we're going to talk about this, we'll refer to the registers as chest voice and head voice just for ease, but we do know there's a million and one things we can call these different registers, different parts of our voice. We do have an episode on terminology, but just for the simplicity and the more common term, we'll refer to that as chest and head from here on out. How are the musical trends actually made? Who decided that skirt trousers would be a thing? And who's making those decisions when it comes to music?
Well, I think today it's the audience. I think that our audience is who decides what they like. And we have to think about how they're listening to music and where they're listening to it. How they're listening to it is essentially two different ways. They're listening to it through headphones in the privacy of their home, on social media, on television, but they're also listening to it in a very different way, which is, in a concert venue, in a very large, uncontrolled sound environment. So that technology that affects those two ways of listening, I would say, is the catalyst for that change. How technology has influenced how people listen to music is what influences our audience quite a bit. It used to be the composers, right? Composers used to write literature, and then that's what audiences would listen to. But I think it's exciting in the sense that this has created a huge cultural interest in singing. And it's what has created a huge demand for voice teachers. One of the reasons that we have such a need for voice teachers and why we have jobs is because so many people want to learn how to sing. So it's exciting, really, even though it puts pressure on us.
Yeah. So when we're talking about registration and the development of these parts of our voice in line with these trends of CCM, how does one laryngeal register, like chest voice, positively impact head voice and how we use that, and vice versa?
So traditionally, teachers have been using the secondary register or auxiliary register, the one that singers don't use as often, to train the voice for a very long time. There's record of Garcia, Marchesi, Vennard using chest voice in women. And the main purpose there was for glottal closure, for firmer, more good quality, stronger sound. We wouldn't normally think of training in chest as, that would just be par for the course for guys, right? We would think. But there is an application in this conversation just because it's so important for men to train in chest when they're singing in falsetto, even if you had a countertenor, even if in the classical world, because there can be ways of producing falsetto that are unhealthy, ways that have constriction where there's damping of the fold or that sort of thing. So we do use chest to train men's falsetto as well. And then going the other direction, using head to train chest, that's mainly historically for training guys in their upper range in chest. So that spot where they have a lot of pressure and we want them to have a little greater ease, maybe expand their range a little bit. And going up into head, they're going to have more airflow, less pressure, and they just get that feeling of a more lightness and also a stretching of the folds. And so they're usually able to bring that feeling back down into the chest voice. So those aren't the mixes, right? But those are the ways we traditionally use for training registers crossing.
Thinking about who we've spoken to on the podcast particularly, but I'm sure a lot of singing teachers say it, is when we're looking at different qualities like belt or more higher intensity singing, Amanda Flynn and Emily Christian Morris have mentioned it, is having those two registers equally balanced, equally accessible and variable, so you can find lots of different colours in them in order to facilitate the belt quality. That can be really tricky when you have somebody who is avoiding a particular register because they don't like it, or it's an area that feels really too new, that they're a bit afraid of it, but still want to belt. So how does head voice and chest voice help in things like belt and other sort of musical nuances?
Singers that have well-developed head voices make excellent belters, right? Very healthy. They don't experience a lot of injury, just in general. I've got quite a few singers in my studio that are fantastic belters that also could sing an aria. There's an analogy I like to think of as like a tug of war between the two muscles. So if you think of, your thyroid retinoid muscle and your cricothyroid muscle, and you think of them pulling against each other. And in a tug of war, both sides have to be pretty strong. They have to be pretty equal. One side is going to be slightly bossy over the other. Maybe one side is winning and the other side's not winning. But if one side is too weak, the game is over. There's no tug of war game anymore. And so I notice when I'm working with my ladies that we don't even have to work on their belt voice. If we work on their head, I mean, eventually, of course we do, but we can be working on their head voice and you come back to their belt and amazing things are happening just because of the balance that they achieved in working on head. So usually we can convert a student pretty quickly when they see the results in their voice.
What are the possible sort of visual and audible characteristics of a TA dominant sound, and what perceived sensations do singers usually say they're having, which is quite popular when they're in that dominant chest zone?
I love this question because I actually have a handout for my students about this.
Oh yeah, nice.
But I'm going to change it because of the way you asked this question, because how you've separated out visual and audible and sensory, and I think that's a great way to do it. This is a vital skill for teachers, of course. I think it's vital for students as well, because when a student starts to actually become an active listener and really realize what the people that the stars that they admire, what they're actually doing, they become very motivated to be able to also be able to do that skill. And so on the audible side, in TA, we would, in a very general sense, lower notes, louder notes, right, at first. Also, we would be thinking of more speech-like vowels. That's what we would hear. On the visual side, we might see a wider mouth position, and we also might see the chin come up as the range ascends, just to accommodate the laryngeal height. On the sensory side, a singer will experience higher pressure, lower airflow, and I think of that tether that we feel. It always feels really connected, and we teach that tether in classical singing, but it's a little bit more innate, I think, in chest voice. It's a heavier mechanism. It feels a little heavier. And for female singers, I would say if there's any vibrato, it usually feels a little more intentional, like I'm adding the vibrato on purpose.
Just want to touch on imitation for a second off the back of that, because I remember when we were speaking with Amanda Flynn on Belt in musical theatre, she mentioned how sometimes when we watch or listen to a singer, we can almost assign it an effort level. And so sometimes when we're watching belters, singers might be, however consciously or unconsciously, going, well, that sounds like a really big sound, so therefore it must be lots of effort. What does that say about imitation? Because we've used it forever, haven't we, since we were kids, learning how to move, how to speak. So does imitation have limitation?
It's a very revealing question, right? Imitation is fast. I think that's why we use it in the studio, because we can say, usually singers are often great imitators, right? It's something that they're often very good at. We're often good at. And so I think it's best used for something kinesthetic rather than something audible, like what the example you just used. I use it more for, like, here's this thing that this singer is doing. Let's imitate it, or imitate me. And what did that feel like to you? Not what did it sound like, and maybe not even what did it look like, but what did it feel like? And usually that's where I find it to be the most useful. And then that's kind of where you're right. The usefulness of imitation kind of stops right there, because we're trying to have students not try to sound like other people, for sure, and not imitate other people's sounds. We're trying to uncover and discover what their sound is like. And often when students come in the studio, they really don't know what that sound is. That's the most fun part of the job, is that moment when your student does something and they sing something and their face is just like, was that me? Did I just do that? And you're like, That was you. That's your voice. That's what you sound like when you're healthy and when you're, So imitation is only useful, you're right, to a certain point.
So with head voice then, what would be those visible, audible and sensory markers that we might be looking out for?
So what we would hear would be, just in a general sense, higher, softer sound, right? And if it's not a mixed voice, we'd hear hootier vowels. Now in the mix, we're going to change that. On the visual side, we'll see a narrower mouth position. Again, in a mixed voice, we might change that. But we'd also see a little more neutral chin. We wouldn't see having to reach. Although, if a student's belting a lot, they might just reach in head voice just out of habit, not realizing they don't need to. The sensory experience in head voice is lighter. It has more airflow, less pressure, and that tether, and I would say that lean that we teach in classical singing, but is also very necessary for any head voice singing, that begins in the abs and ends in your face. In my studio, we say in your face. You can say your mask or whatever. Has to be taught because the tether is not as secure. It can feel more wobbly. It can feel not as stable. Sometimes that's why singers don't always love head voice at first. And then the vibrato for female singers feels more natural, not as intentional.
From your experience as a singer and a teacher, what is your perspective on the training of vocal registers in terms of where it becomes addressed in that learning process? Do you feel like it's like a really high priority, or is it case by case?
That's a great question. I think of it in terms of what I prefer ideally as a teacher and what really, really happens in real life in the studio. I really like the pedagogue Emma Zahler, I think is how you pronounce her name. And she has a 5-register model, which sounds like a lot, but I think with singers, it's very freeing for them to realize that these transitions and shifts that they experience are common to us all. So I'll just show it here real quick. And it's limited in terms of all analogies and diagrams break down at some point. But when I wrote this article 7 years ago, I was mostly trying to show this main passaggio here that we train in a similar fashion for men and women. And so I'll just kind of talk about this little graph here and just how I use it when training registers, because I do use it with everybody, just in a general sense of seeing where does my range fall in terms of where these shifts occur and, what can I expect? And so we've got women over on this side and men over here, and just seeing where the ranges are distributed on either side of this main passaggio. And then also showing the head mixes, that the traditional head mixes where they were and contemporary head mixes where they are. So I would use this mostly with students in a general sense, and I wouldn't be introducing it in a advanced sense right away. I'll just make a quick comment about terminology. I wish we had a word for this passaggio, because I love that Italian word, right? It's so inviting instead of saying break or whatever. But I will get mixed up and upside down if I start talking about primo and secondo, because I want to call this the same thing. And I think we teach it in a similar fashion. So the article calls this a physiological shift, which of course in the studio is a completely unuseful term. It's way too wordy. I'm kind of on the hunt for a word that we could use that would encompass the fact that this is very similar in how we teach men and women and how we experience that as singers. And so that's what this diagram is designed to show. And then these dotted lines would be kind of the middle of the acoustic registers. Of course, those are a span and not a specific point. So I'll stop sharing there. But for the purpose of this discussion, we're talking about the advanced use of registration, not just what I was showing on that diagram, but actually belting and pushing that primo passaggio up And also men crossing over the primo and really advanced usage of the mode 2 of the head voice. Would I prefer for them to be very advanced singers before they're doing those two things? In the ideal world, yes, that would be fantastic. But in the real world, what happens is I have children who want to audition for Matilda and Winnie Foster and Annie, and I have to rally and try to cross-train them and keep them healthy. The cross-training will reveal if there's a problem, if there's anything that's making them unhealthy, but they surprise me all the time.
And for our audio listeners, April there's just shown us a diagram, so come join us over on YouTube and you'll be able to see that for yourself. The word acoustics always sends a shiver up my spine because it's not a word that I get along with yet too well. But can you help us get our heads around what acoustic register shifts look like and how we as teachers can find the best vowel or vocal tract shape to help us with specific tasks and crossing over the range?
That's a great question, and it is a very deep dive topic that we'll just kind of touch on. This is interesting because for men and women, these are in different spots. And I'll pull that up just one more time so we can acknowledge that the acoustic register, as I called it in this article, we could call it a resonant shift. That might be a nice word. For the man is occurring in chest voice, and he's going to experience that first on his way up. And then for the woman is in head voice. And that's the other reason I don't like the primo secondo, because which direction are you going? Are you descending or ascending when you experience these passaggi? So anyway, not to complain about old terms, but some of them work with teaching music theater and CCM, and some of them we kind of have to mold to our teaching. So the dotted line is what's representing kind of the middle of that shift, acoustic shift or resonant shift. And of course, it's really more of a span of notes. That would depend on the voice type, and not even the voice type. You very astutely brought up, it would also depend upon the vowel. So I'm inspired again by you to go back to my old handouts, because this is an old handout, and revamp it and add a range of notes into that, because this wasn't meant to show acoustic registers, but it could indeed show acoustic registers better. So for women, when they're up in this head mix vicinity, I really like the work of Shenandoah, and this is where the jaw is dropped. And so I feel that we can use any vowel that is an open vowel or has been a modified open vowel. So ah is a great one to start with, and of course it's hard. And of course either a or if the jaw is open. But the trick here for us is that in traditional training of this, for the woman it would have been the secondo passaggio, this resonance shift or whatever we're going to call it, traditionally we would have maybe darker vowels, it's hootier, but now we want that back room and front room to be separated. We want the back room to still be open, because otherwise we can't sing up that high. But we want the front room to be speech-like. And that's what the challenge is keeping the front room to sound just like a normal human being that's just talking to you with this wonderful space in the back. And so I use Shenandoah for teaching that. And of course, we're dealing with the twangs in that space. I still need to separate my twangs and not darkening vowels in that space. And for the guys, the reason I use the closed vowels for guys at first, oo and e, and I do teach the traditional mix for guys in that resonant shift, that acoustic register, just so they can lower pressure and feel that laryngeal position and have that timbre available to them. But of course, they're probably not going to use cover in music theater much, unless it's golden age maybe, and they're going to be more belting. But still, for guys, they're going to be wanting to have that range of notes that they are preparing to cross the functional passaggio, if we wanted to call it that, instead of the resonance one. So I do use the smaller front vowels like oo and e at first, and the only reason I do that is consistent with Kenneth Bozeman's work. Those are the ones where the shift occurs first, right? So if the guys can grab onto that early in their range, low, they can hang on to it. But of course, that's got to be trained on all the vowels, as all of these resonance shifts do. And really, the way to think of resonance, I know it's such a scary word, resonance registers, it's kind of a tongue twister, is it's vocal tract shaping. Vocal tract shaping is exciting. In my studio, we do this funny little thing where we do this. That does not mean loser. And I can just tell your listeners that I'm just putting my L shape, that usually means loser, right, up on my face. And all that means is we are experimenting with, do I have hoot? And do I have natural vowels that sound like a real person? What kind of balance do I have in there? Usually this is a little bit of twang. And so that's our little symbol.
Hey you! If you're enjoying the Singing Teachers Talk podcast, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We are committed to bringing you engaging conversations and valuable insights from experts across the field of voice. By subscribing, it means we can continue to do that. You'll never miss an episode, and you'll be helping to spread the word to other singing teachers, vocal coaches, and overall voice nerds. So subscribe to this channel now and just watch your teaching grow.
Aspirate and really intimate sounds like we hear from artists like Billie Eilish and Lizzie McAlpine and Phoebe Bridgers, they're quite popular. What would be your advice to teachers working with singers who are looking for this breathy aesthetic and who might be maybe therefore a little bit resistant to train functionally in something like vocal fold closure and a thicker chest voice?
The first issue, I think, and a great motivator is, what are you going to do when you perform this song live? And these artists have run into these things. This is documented, what happens when these songs are done live. It's a kind of a nightmare for their sound technicians, right? It's fantastic in a recording studio in a very controlled environment, and it's very difficult to replicate in an uncontrolled environment with a loud audience and a loud band. And so I think it's great to remind students that this is one way to sing it, and it will work in the recording studio, and it's not going to work in my recital because I can't pick you up. The other thing I think it's always good to discuss with students about any vocal technique is longevity. Is just to say, this is a simple, how long would you like to sing? And the question is, I'm not trying to be harsh. We're going to get into something more positive, but the answer for us, all of us, is always, I want to sing forever. But if we want to sing till we're 90, we have to take a look at that. What decisions do we want to make sure that we have a long, healthy career? And we want to take a look at vocal colors, for sure. The aspirate sound it's just one vocal color, right? It's not a bad one. It's just one. But I think that we've already established that trends change quickly. Fans are fickle. And so singers need to have many, many vocal colors at their disposal. And the vocal tract is capable of so many vocal colors. So helping a singer be able to access all of those is a wonderful thing. But the most important answer, of course, is just vocal fold health and helping a singer stay healthy. We do know that aspirate, that production sometimes is produced by holding the folds apart, right? It's tense. And that could lead to problems. But, we've thought that things were causing vocal problems over the years that weren't for a long time. I mean, we thought that heavy metal screamers were like just trashing their voices, and then we found out they weren't, not at all. They had long careers, their vocal folds weren't even touching when they were screaming. That's where cross-training is so fantastic, because if we cross-train, this sounds corny, but the voice will speak to us. The voice will reveal to us if there's something wrong when we cross-train. And so the aspirate singing might be causing an issue, and it might not be. So when I was training my singer that was doing the song from the Barbie movie, What Was I Made For? We did things like, because she was going to be performing it live, we did things like onsets, balanced onsets, to make sure that those were still in her toolbox. And we did things like messa di voce, placement of the voice. That's not a popular way to teach now, but that's what that word means. And that's so hard, meaning soft singing with core in the tone. Well, that a microphone can pick up. And it's hard, so hard to do. So those were just some ideas.
What's your favorite vocal exercise for helping a singer to develop a reliable and functional chest voice then? So you've got the messa di voce and the balanced onsets for someone who wants to sing maybe in that more intimate, quiet tone. What are you doing to help people find that functional chord closure, TA dominance that can help them through that particular part of their range?
I mean, I use a lot of sources. I use a lot of books, old ones and new ones. Dr. Kari Reagan has a book called The Systematic Approach to Voice, and she uses a V consonant, which has some nice airflow for chest, and an A vowel, and just a nice soft kind of, we'll see if I can sing it in the morning over here. So she says, va 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 va, va 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 va, va 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 va. So she uses that.
Male falsetto and head voice, it's often being peppered throughout CCM from the likes of bands The Weeknd, also musical theatre in roles like Jersey Boys, where we're making more of that bright, twangy, if you like, shape and sound. Bonnie and Clyde and Hadestown. What is one of your favourite exercises for helping a singer, particularly males, to develop a reliable and functional M2?
So this would be an old one. I really like Richard Miller, The Structure of Singing. That book is really dog-eared of all of his exercises. And for the guy, I like doing things that cross that passaggio, because that's what he's going to be doing a lot. He's crossing and coming back and crossing and coming back. So when I'm working girls, I'm starting in head and crossing down into chest and coming back and going that direction. When I'm working guys, usually I'm starting in chest, crossing this direction back into head. This is going to convict me that I need to work on this for my guys, because I'm a lot better at the head voice one, at the the one coming the other direction. I need to work on this for my men. We would generally work on larger intervals first, like octaves, and then we would work on bringing that interval smaller and that kind of thing. And then we would work by step. We'll see if I can even do this one right now. It'll be yodely. And by the way, I use color when I'm teaching registration. So I color code everything like an elementary school teacher. And then it really is helpful. And I also gesture. So I think that really helps. So I'm going to go here, right? So we're changing by step. And having guys do that. So you can kind of hear that little yodel until the point where they can switch on one note. So I have a lot of students that can right, back and forth on many notes. You can hear so that's what I like for the guys.
And what range would you be doing that between?
Right at the passaggio.
And for the girls, can you show us one that you would do for those female presenting voices in the other direction?
Well, we do the same one. Well, I could show you something different for fun. We do Julie Andrews' Lonely Goat Herd. Lay, yodelay, yodelay, So if you go fast, lay, yodelay, yodelay, you're getting that. It just kind of helps the larynx be loose, which the ladies need, but the guys really need too. Stabilizing the laryngeal position, super, super important. So going the other direction for the girls would just be your, and then you'd go, right?
Oh, great.
So,
social media is usually a host for lots of things, but riff challenges or fast moving passages, we see a lot of people seeking out a car park and singing lots of big belty riffy bits. How does establishing registers like this assist in successful execution of melismas and riffs and runs and those sorts of spicy colours that we find?
Well, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it because, in the past, we would not have thought of registration as a go-to system for teaching agility. It wasn't even in the radar. But you are so right, because the riffs that people are doing now cross multiple passaggi. I'm thinking of like the whistle register, and it takes so much coordination and skill to be able to cross this quickly. I call it Olympic. These are Olympic feats in the voice. I had a student that sang the role of Jane Doe in Ride the Cyclone. And I mean, there's belt in that role, but there's also whistle, and it comes all the way back down into chest, and it's absolutely crazy of what you're talking about. And we have to have that lighter adjustment that, in chest, a very light adjustment to be able to make those crossings happen. But I will make a quick note on the training of that. It's easier to sing these runs when I listen to people on social media doing these amazing things, and they're amazing. It's not that they're easy, but it is slightly easier to do them in that kind of aspirate, light timbre, kind of almost a half voice. I think that's a little bit easier, but I think it builds skill, and it also stability to train yourself to do those runs in a little bit more full voice, a little more core in the tone. So when I'm working my students, I ask them to sing full voice when they're working their agility exercises, because I think it makes them better, even if they want to perform them differently.
In musical theatre, belt ranges and tenor rolls are seemingly getting higher and higher and higher and higher. I mean, back in traditional belt, we're looking for women up to about the D5 as a top. What is a strategy to help belting higher when it comes to negotiating thickness and thinness?
Well, high belt singers will tell you feels different, right, than heavy belting. And I have several singers in the studio that can belt to, F sharp, G5 vicinity. I remember when F was the top, and I thought that was awful, and then it kept going. So I would say right above that D flat D is kind of where I think, I'm not a high belter myself, but the people that are high belters would say that kind of shifts into high belt. It's a very resonance forward strategy, right? The resonance is really, really in the front. So we work that really, really hard. And of course, these singers are very, very strong in their head voice. So what you just said about thin, thick fold, I think, and I think I'm not alone in thinking this, that we control our glottal adduction by our breath. So the thin fold, thick fold vibration is all controlled by how much airflow and how little or greater breath pressure is behind that airflow. So we feel the pressure either being released or building up behind, but the way that we actually achieve it is how skillful our breathing technique is. I teach my singers to breathe the same way for music theater and for CCM as they do for opera. We have the resisting the collapse of the rib cage, and we use the abs because that has lower subglottal pressure, and anything we can do to reduce pressure in high belt is what we want. We're constantly looking for ways to reduce pressure, and I even have a handout for that. I should have thought of that handout.
Yeah, I want these handouts.
Yeah, I knew that. I type everything up. So, what are the ways we can reduce pressure? We can drop the jaw. We can make the mouth wider. The larynx, we like to be low when it can be. We can lift the chin up a little bit to accommodate the larynx. But this, putting the pressure into the rib cage is a big one. The brighter timbre definitely helps with lowering pressure.
I really like Chris Johnson's description of the rib cage and how the shoulders, he talks about how the shoulders are a gateway to the ribs and how the ribs could shift. I think he talks about 4 times more air than the abdominals. So the abdominals being the more efficient way to kind of shift air and instead of the ribs, otherwise we're going to have a lot to work against.
Have you ever seen a Hoberman's sphere? Do you know what that is?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So we breathe with this, and breathe as if this is the rib cage. But then when we are singing and we exhale, we keep this out. So it's just our visual for our elevated, buoyant rib cage.
I do have one of those, but I didn't realize what the name was, and yours is massive. I've just got a teeny tiny. I wouldn't get one of those big ones. It's bigger than my head.
You can try to get inside it if you want.
Oh, I would absolutely do that.
So I also really like Mary Saunders Barton, as does everyone. And I like some of the exercises in her Bel Canto Can Belto. That's a fun title, very clever. And she uses a lot of pitched speech into the singing voice, which I think is really useful in teaching belt. And just in a nutshell, the reason being you're grabbing onto an emotional motivation for one, and then it's very abdominally engaged, and it has a very forward resonance, and that can be adapted to the song, it can be adapted to the vowel, it can be adapted to the approach of the song, and it can become a much more complicated exercise. But I was a little afraid when I first started teaching to learn pitch speech, because I always think of that kind of in the category of the speech language pathologist. But we can train ourselves, if we haven't already, to hear what pitch speech sounds like. So I'll just show you real quick. If I was to speak on this note and say, stop that, kind of a emotionally charged word, and in an vowel, stop that, right? Stop that, stop that, stop that, stop that. I use that in belt a lot, but then we take it into a much closer to the song and higher level and more difficult approaches.
I'd love to quote from your article, if that's okay, because I really like the way you described mix. One possible scientifically accurate way to describe mix is to say that it occurs when borrowing at least one physical element of the other register, which results in also sharing some of its quality. So what have you found to be a successful way for a singer to borrow characteristics of the opposite laryngeal register for finding, say, a lighter chest voice or a heavier head voice or whatever they're looking for?
Thank you so much for liking that description. I appreciate that. It is such a sticky topic, right? And you kind of have to be crazy to write a paper on the subject of registration. Who would do that? And believe it or not, I have a handout on this too. This is where we think about the 4 mixes, and I wouldn't be alone in thinking this way. 2 chest mixes and 2 head mixes, and how those 2 chest mixes borrow from head and how the 2 head mixes borrow from chest. So for chest mix is borrowing airflow, and that's why it doesn't sound so raw and so heavy, because it's borrowing airflow. If we're talking about a female singer who's not used to singing in chest, she might also borrow things like space in the back, high palate, low larynx. If they're after, we're after a ringy sound, she might also borrow jaw space. If she's, if it's a female singer and not used to singing in that part of her voice, she might borrow vibrato that is more intentionally produced. In belt, we would keep all of those things and a forward resonance as well, if it isn't already present. And then we would add this more advanced breathing that we just discussed. If it's a guy, he's already hopefully knows how to apply that in his chest voice. If it's a woman, she's borrowing that from head voice and bringing it down into chest. In the head mixes, there's legit, the golden age kind of things. And of course, people still need to have these in their book, right? If they're going to audition for musicals, they need to have every type. And what we're borrowing is glottal closure. We can take the glottal closure that we experience in chest voice, and how do we get that in head voice? Well, we get it in 2 different ways. We get it from the old-fashioned way, which is vowel modification. And we know that what we do at the front of the vocal tract affects the back. We know that when we modify vowels, those sound waves go right back down our throat. They don't just come this way, and they actually help close the folds. But of course, that is not something we don't always want to sing in a legit way. So we don't always want to use the vowel modification way of helping to close the folds. And that's where head mix comes in. And head mix is where we achieve glottal closure via the pharyngeal constrictors. And I used to think they were the enemy, just like I thought the tongue was the enemy. And of course, Carrie Obert is helping us all embrace the tongue and the pharyngeal constrictors. I'm grateful to her for that. But we're achieving glottal closure via the twangs, right? And so those are helping us, assisting us in a controlled and coordinated fashion to achieve closure that's not constriction.
How can we continue to help train CCM singers in healthy vocal production and reliable vocal technique, but still be able to embrace the vocal imperfections which can come from raw performance, and also to satisfy the changing parts of the fickleness of trends?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to ask my singers questions about their choices, their artistic choices, and say, because it's up to them as an artist, right? Not me as a teacher. I like to say, is that choice that you're making a habitual choice? It's a hard question, right? Or is an artistic one? Because sometimes some of the things that we do are habitual, and we have to break those habits. If we have a million hard onsets in a song, maybe we need to evaluate that. Maybe those are all really for achieving a sound that we really, really want and communicating something to the audience, and maybe it's not. It's great to record ourselves. It's very important to record ourselves, because we might listen back and go, yeah, I think I could let this and this and this go. You know, this isn't serving me. If something is taxing our voice, if it's pressure, if it's wear and tear, fatiguing, and it's not for a purpose, then it's not serving us. We need to just let it go. It's about strategizing the piece. It's about singing smart and planning, where do I want to use my pressure? Where are my money notes? Do I want to be able to belt this higher? Do I want to be able to do this cool ending? Well, if I can't do that, where can I take away some of the other things that I'm doing that are maybe less important so that I can achieve that goal? So I let my singers make those artistic choices, but I do ask them the questions to help them make smart decisions in how they shape in their artistry.
Looking ahead, I know that we're not psychics or anything, and we can't really know, but if you had to put in a prediction right now, how do you think popular music will continue to shape vocal pedagogy? And do you have an inkling as to what trend might make a reappearance in CCM?
Well, gosh. Well, I'll go back. Let's go back in time first for just a second. And that is because it's interesting to think about how pedagogy has been shaped. And it first was shaped by composers. And composers wrote music, and then the literature shaped voice pedagogy, right? That was historical. And then what we're in right now is technology shaped voice science, photography, and how fast the folds are moving. And we're still learning things because of photography catching up with how fast the folds move. And that influences how we teach. What we're in now is model number 3, I would say, which is, we're still in 2, of course, but we've added this new model, which is that popular music is influencing the vocal health of our performers and of our students. And we have to meet this need. Gosh, of course, belting was big when I wrote this article. Falsetto was less so than it is now. So I guess it was a teeny bit prophetic just on accident. What could come back? I don't know. I hope legit Disney princess singing. I want more songs for my men I want bass roles and baritone roles. How about that?
Yeah, Let's put it out there. Let's put it out there. Oh, April, thank you so much. Where can our listeners find out more about you and the work that you do?
Well, my website is just young-voice.net. So, and I'm terrible about social media, but I'm easy to find there.
Oh, great. April, it's been so lovely to chat. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Alexa. It's been a lot of fun.